world, hello Iceland. Welcome to our today's show. We will be focusing on energy and the sustainability of that. We did actually plan to have a section in our show today on transparency and democracy. But in the Icelandic Parliament, there are hot discussions taking place right now. So we will focus on the energy. My name is Ragnar Finnbogason on the behalf of Icelandic Times. Welcome to our show. In the studio, we have Alexander Richter of Think Geoenergy and Guðni Jóhannesson of the National Energy Authority. Waiting on the line will be a member of the German Parliament, which is Mr. Janecek, and he will be coming to us as soon as he has overcome the traffic situation in Berlin. Alexander, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Have you had this traffic situation in Berlin yourself?
Not in Berlin, but in several other cities. Traffic is something that we simply don't experience here in Iceland.
We don't. No, that is a fortunate situation in Iceland, that we don't have too much traffic. Guðni, did you find the studio easily, or did you have your issues?
No, I just mostly discovered that people are very reluctant in this area to put numbers on the houses. So it was some kind of a puzzle to come here, but with some guiding, I made it. Nice to be here.
Thank you. I do understand that that Dieter is on the line. Dieter Janecek.
Yes, I am. Hello. So I'm just coming from the Parliament and had a debate to do, but now I'm right here and appreciate to be here.
Thank you, Dieter, for coming to the show. First of all, we do understand the traffic situation in Berlin is not good at the moment. We have a similar situation in Iceland. There's a hot debate taking place on the future planning regarding the usage of hydrothermal energy. Now, taking it to that issue, Guðni, the planning of the future of excavating hydrothermal energy in Iceland.
Yes, it is like that we have already harnessed about 660 megawatts of geothermal electricity in Iceland. And also for the low temperature use of our low temperature sources, we have now 90% of the heating and hot water consumption in Iceland is covered by geothermal. So geothermal is a very big part of our energy system already. And furthermore, we have about 9 terawatt hours of geothermal energy in the pipelines in the so-called, as a result of the last so-called master plan scheme. And we are exploring for more. So the future for geothermal in Iceland and of course the past history of geothermal are very bright.
Thank you for that one. You are using figures that for me as a not professional in this field are quite abstract. Now 660 megawatt or 9 terawatts. What do you do with that amount of energy?
Well, if you take 1 terawatt hour, it's enough electricity to provide electricity for a town with 100,000 people. So that is 10 terawatt hours. We would then have energy for 1 million. In Iceland, we are now producing 18 terawatt hours. So we could provide a city of 1.8 million people with electricity. But as we are only 330,000, we have to find some other uses for it.
Thank you for that one. Alexander, talking about the usage of hydropower in Iceland, your view on the sustainability, is Iceland using its energy sources in a sustainable way?
The answer is clearly yes. Iceland is tapping into a natural resource, not only on the geothermal side, but also water. And in that sense, utilizing natural resources and doing that sustainable in a way that it kind of will exist for further generations as well. And this is, I think, the role of Guðni and the Energy Authority is to make sure that this continues to be that way. So yeah, Iceland is just doing this very sustainably, but also in a way that it affects the people, I think, like more than anywhere else. It's not only an economic factor, but also a cultural factor. The geothermal energy as one of the energy forms in Iceland being used is so much part of the daily life of every Icelander. I compare this a lot with my home country, Germany, where we pay so much more in energy just in a daily use for heating and for water and so on. And I think here in Iceland, people don't appreciate how cheap energy is and the luxury of having such cheap energy and green energy as well. So culturally, kind of the way energy plays a role, or geothermal plays a role here in Iceland is very unique. Swimming pools that are open year-round in the relatively harsh climate of Iceland is something that is very unique, and how many people utilize this and use this on a daily basis is quite remarkable. So I think that is very unique for Iceland.
Dieter, how is Germany and the policy of Germany in terms of hydropower and geothermal power?
Well, I think the situation in Germany is quite different to Iceland because we don't have that much hydropower. There's maybe a lot of in the south part, Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg. So in Bavaria it's 17% about, but it's not to be expected that it's getting much more. So we're more focusing on the other renewable energies like solar and wind. And geothermal, for example, is in some parts of Bavaria an issue, but we don't expect to be that much important to the whole energy mix.
Germany is now transferring from being a very nuclear power-oriented economy, and you are now in the transition to other media. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, the good thing in Germany is that since 2011, we have a consensus on renewable energies and getting out of nuclear. So after Fukushima, the last ones in our parliament said, okay, we have to go the other way. And now this consensus leads us to 25% renewable energies, and we reached this amount without having that much hydropower. So it's really coming from solar and wind mostly, and that's the first success we have now. But the next step is going to be more different. It's going to be about the grids. We have a huge discussion, especially in Bavaria, the southern part, where a huge grid has to be built to get the wind power from the north to the south, or maybe the solar power from the south to the north. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot more, let's say the first phase of renewable energy was the romantic phase, where we could just build up new in renewable forms, but now we have to get the whole system integrated, and that's much more complicated. And according to the price problem, you say, so maybe in Iceland, price for electricity is because of hydropower very cheap. Mm-hmm. In Germany, for the private consumer, it's not so cheap, but we learned to handle energy very efficiently. And so I just like to compare in Texas, United States, the energy is more cheaper, but it's not so efficient that they use it, so they pay the same like we do in Germany for the product. So it's a good, the Energiewende, how it's called in Germany, is a successful story, but we have to move forward definitely. Mm-hmm.
Alexander, regarding geothermal now in Iceland and the crossover to the mainland Europe.
Well, I mean, it's something, geothermal is, particularly in Germany, a bit of an underestimated source of energy. Germany has gone a very, very unique way in supporting the renewable energy development by introducing a feed-in system, which basically helps to cover the cost to help renewable energy technologies to become competitive and price competitive with fossil fuels. And that model is being applied in several other countries now. So Germany has done a great job in developing that model to help technologies become cost competitive in the market. Naturally, that there's a sense of that this kind of increased the prices for the consumer, but I think overall the system has worked really well, and it has helped to decrease the cost for solar power installations, for example, in Germany quite dramatically. But it also has developed a relatively well-equipped geothermal industry in Germany, which is probably not that much known.
That's interesting.
There are today, I mean, in comparison to Iceland, very little, but there are about 27 megawatts of installed power generation capacity in Germany, which is little in the overall context. Mm-hmm. But based off that Germany is not in a volcanic area, mm-hmm. It has developed the technology to utilize geothermal with relatively little resources. But probably more important though is the use of geothermal for heating. And I think our other person here in the call can maybe confirm that, is that heating will become increasingly an issue in Europe. And geothermal can play a really important role in that in Eastern Europe, and it also plays a big role for several municipalities in the Bavarian area. And I think in that context, the German experience is actually quite good. And doing the jump over to Iceland, and again in the heating side, Europe, the political situation of energy security, the role of heating and the dependency on foreign sources for heating is a huge concern in Europe. And that's why there's a lot of emphasis now being taken on securing energy for heating. And geothermal in that part could play a very important role. And I think that's where the Icelandic industry with that experience can play a big role. And a lot of the emphasis of the Icelandic politicians, the development aid, and also through the energy authority in their activities has been promoting geothermal in that regard and supporting schemes like that. But maybe that's where Guðni could talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, Guðni.
Yes, you're quite right. It's like that. I'm the coordinator of Geothermal Eranet, the European project. And what we see is that we see possibilities of using low temperature sources. Now everything in Iceland that is under 160 degrees centigrade is low temperature. But we see the potential for heating and hot water consumption in Europe by geothermal sources, by building out district heating. And Iceland is, for instance, very active in projects in former Eastern Europe, like Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, and even in the Azores in Portugal, where utilizing these geothermal sources on European soil. And this is very profitable because 1 kilowatt of low temperature heat from geothermal springs or geothermal wells is replacing 1 kilowatt hour of energy from gas. So it has both high importance for the climate change mitigation, and it also has a very high importance for the strategic development of the European energy system to reduce the dependency on gas and gas deliveries from outside the area.
Dieter, the view of the German government, or maybe now of the Green Party, for which you are a member of Parliament or a member of the fraction in the Bundestag, self-sufficiency and the strategic role of energy. Can you tell us a little bit about your views?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that energy is definitely a geostrategic issue and also an issue for having more peace in the world. So if you look to the big regions in the world where oil is produced, gas is produced, the Middle East or Russia, so we should get more independent in Europe from those parts of the world, definitely. So especially the Russian conflict, Ukraine. So why don't we talk about European Union heading out for much more efficiency and renewables instead of talking of diversifying our gas supply? So I think that's definitely issues we should discuss more. And Germany is one of the leading countries in Europe. So I hope for my government that it will take a leading part in this discussion. So in the end of this year, in December, we will have the climate summit in Paris, and we want to increase our emission goals for the European Union. So that's what we really try to push hard for. And I think the one real argument is that if we want to have a sustainable economy and if we want to reduce costs in the future, it's only one way. It's by efficiency and renewable energy, because fossil fuels is so much expensive. There was just a new IMF study just released on May 18th. So I think it's 2 days ago, and they said it's $5 billion in every year for subsidies for energy on the fossil way. And that's really a lot. It's 6.5% of the global GDP. And so we should really go on that and maybe argue much more with the economy and also with the climate, but also argument with the sustainable economy.
This is quite an interesting figure now. Guðni, you being the head of the Aeronet and globally active in communication and knowledge transfer and consultancy, probably spending 6.5% of the world's GDP on subsidizing fossil and non-renewable energy.
Yes, that is of course how you make the books. I cannot verify this figure or I cannot counteract it, because this is of course depending on what you see as subsidies. But it's clear that our economy is very much fossil-driven economy, and our functions and the way of life are very much based on the fact that we have unlimited access to fossil fuels today. But we know that this will not be forever. We have to change. And if we take Iceland, for instance, even if we are very successful on electricity and heating, we are still using 700,000 cubic meters of oil per year, which is about 2 cubic meters per person. And that is far too much. And we have to change this. We have to convert our car fleet to electricity and other non-fossil fuels. But we also have our big shipping fleet to consider, and of course the aviation, which is increasing with increasing tourism. So all these factors have to be considered, and this is now our challenge for the future. We managed to transfer the heating of houses to district heating from geothermal, from fossil fuels, and that is not very easy in a country with 330,000 inhabitants on 105,000 square kilometers. I can say, for instance, that the longest pipeline from the well to the house, to a house that is heated with geothermal, is 63 kilometers.
But you're not telling us that's for one single house, is it?
No, it's the end of a big system. Yeah. But anyhow, this is the furthest distance.
Yeah.
Could I maybe
Alexander,
just
please go ahead.
Add one thing? I think the report that Dieter is referring to here is actually really, really interesting, and it showcases the wrong discussion we've been having for many, many years, basically about renewables being not competitive. The reason they are not competitive is because fossil fuels have been subsidized so greatly. And you could turn this discussion also around about putting a price on carbon emissions, which would also then tax fossil fuels and provide a way more level playing field for all kinds of energies. And then let's see kind of who kind of gets in front of the competition. And I think that's a crucial thing that we have to rethink, because the cost of emitting a carbon emissions is much greater than we think. So it's a responsibility that we have to our and the next generations, is to kind of create that level field that makes it fair for everyone. And there's been a fantastic report by the Worldwide Fund for Nature for several years ago that was kind of doing a climate vision report on how they see the energy developing by 2050, and they looked at all different technologies, and they looked at it not only from an energy demand side, they also looked at how can we decrease carbon emissions, and they ranked different technologies, and it was very interesting. Number 2 was actually geothermal, and that then particular with regards to the heating. Number 1 was energy efficiency, so essentially saving energy, and number 2 was geothermal. In the overall scheme, and I think that's probably the more bigger picture that we should keep in mind, was that even though geothermal was that number 2 technology, it in the overall energy scheme, it was playing a role of only approximately 6% in the overall energy scheme. But what it showed is that geothermal has this big potential, yes, from an electricity perspective, but more so on the direct use for heating and all kinds of different heating applications. Not only being a cost-effective source of energy, but also saving cost, and last but not least, saving emissions. And I think in that context, to see geothermal playing such an important role, 6% of the overall energy scheme is not little. And by creating a fair playing field for everyone, all the different energy technology could play way much better together, and geothermal would play, an important part in the overall energy mix.
Talking about cost efficiency, it's been said that, and it's been calculated that the standard of living in Iceland is about 6 to 10% higher because we have geothermal heating of the houses compared if we would still have fossil fuels. So these are very, very negative subsidies here in Iceland.
Now, taking the energy as a local source in most countries and our economy being global, that simply means that the demand for energy is very scattered around the globe. Guðni, from your point of view, being from the National Energy Authority in Iceland, and you are exporting both knowledge and energy, how do you tackle this point in sustainable energy as an idea and as a product that you are supplying to the markets?
Yeah, this is a very interesting subject, and this is very difficult to explain, because when we are building a new factory in Iceland, like for an aluminium smelter, we are increasing the CO2 emissions, and people are looking at that. But at the same time, if this factory would be built elsewhere, like close to a lignite mine that produces the worst type of fossil fuel there is to provide electricity, we are making enormous gains for the local climate and for the global climate and for reduced pollution. So we have to look at these things globally, not locally. And we have in our when we develop our future system, as Alexander mentioned here about the carbon tax and so on, we have to make this system work so that we get that we move in the right direction. We are really getting hold of the important global parameters.
Dieter, do you see a possibility for Iceland supplying Europe with more of sustainable energy in one way or the other, or will we see another pipeline from Russia through the Baltic to Germany?
Well, that's difficult to answer, but definitely we have to reach out within Europe for our grids, and so we have now built a cable to Norway, so undersea. That's, I think, for more than 1 billion euros. So we're reaching out for sharing our energy with other parts of Europe, and so Iceland's definitely a partner for that. But the most important thing for energy is to save energy, I think. So we should also very much focus on energy efficiency relations. For example, the Ukraine is a country which is very much relying on Russian gas, but they're very bad in using energy and they're very inefficient in that. So having peace in the world is also talking about lots of having more efficiency in the use of energy. So I think that's very important to go. And the other thing is, for Germany, it's important. So we're still one of the biggest industry nations in the world. It's, I think, the number 4 in the world from our production process. And as you told, when there is a new production opened anywhere, so it's better to have it in that place where it's most efficient and most renewable and the standards are most the best. And I think the very important thing is to have a level playing field, as I think Alexander said it before, where we have a carbon price that's actually appropriate, so that includes external costs, and that is not having a market where fossil fuels with huge subsidies are dominating, but giving chances for the other sources.
Mm-hmm. You just mentioned now previously the impact of democratic development, peace, and energy being one of the key resources for local development. Now, taking a look at non-related issues such as economical development in Northern Africa being one of the issues that would perhaps help a lot of people in sustaining their life. How big is the energy part of Germany's policy towards helping out nations around the world in both economical and in democratical terms?
Well, I think that could be better, but we're starting some projects with other countries and try to give them our knowledge, not so much our energy, because the energy we're producing is very much coal still. Germany has a 43% part of coal in the energy mix. But for example, Morocco is a country which is very much heading for 100% renewable energy, and I think they will be in 2020. They're building a geothermal superpower plants and especially solar power, and for that there is one country, and this is Morocco in the Northern African part, who's trying to go in another direction than others do. So, and I've been to Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Emirates in March this year with our economy minister. And so you see this country is so much relating on oil, and they have 90% of their GDP, for example, Saudi Arabia or Qatar, is related on oil. So as long as it's that much, so they're depending on that, and they're not able to invest in their future, because the future will be, when oil is gone, then they don't have any future if they don't invest now in renewable sources and efficiency. So that's what we have to make clear.
It's a great point there. We are going to save a little bit of energy right now and play some beautiful music. Now, for our listeners, both domestically and worldwide, stay with us. We will have the second round after this beautiful Icelandic song.
Does something exist after we pass away? After we've been laid down in our graves? Do we collide into a dark flow? Does something exist without existing? Are we all sculptured out of nothing? Is the soul an idea or is it something you don't know? We are stardust. We are gold. I don't mind. Something exists after we pass away, after we've been laid down in our graves. Do we collide into a dark flow? A moment in life, a moment in time, the moment is in your mind. A moment in life, a moment in time, the moment is in your mind. A moment in life, a moment in time, the moment is in your mind. A moment in life, a moment in time, the moment is in your mind. A moment in life, a moment in time, the moment is in your mind.
Well, this was a fantastic break. We just had a Guatemalan coffee that has been transported around the Atlantic with a ship driven by oil probably, but we did cook that coffee with a renewable energy. How's the coffee, guys?
Coffee is nice.
Dieter,
I have water and actually no coffee.
talking about the issue of development aid and how that relates to energy and democracy. Iceland has been transferring its IP or intellectual property in terms of geothermal aid. Is Germany doing something similar in the neighboring states?
Well, not that much as we could do, I think, and especially as you do. So you say you have your intellectual property and you share it with others. So that's not the kind of culture we have at the moment. But we have projects and we have development aid, and we have some money in that, and we have some banks who try to give the money to it. So there is some development, but it could be much better, I think. So, and especially on the energy topic, because we still have some believers in the government, from my perspective, that think it's good to have nuclear plants, maybe not in Germany, but outside, in Brazil or other parts of the world. We can have alternative technologies sold there, because some of the German companies still invest in coal and in nuclear energy. So that's the point.
Alexander, you have a point on this issue.
It is actually very interesting, and I think that's people don't realize this, that particularly the European development banks, supported by their local governments, their national governments, are actually very active in financing renewable energy projects worldwide. Actually, first and foremost, renewable energy projects. So a lot of money is available for helping countries, for example, in East Africa to develop their energy market and keep up with the economic growth there, and supporting that growth and building their economies. And interesting enough is that a lot of that money actually has been going into geothermal. So particularly in Kenya, a lot of the projects that also our Icelandic companies are involved in is essentially actually financed by European development banks, the World Bank and other international banks. And that actually kind of provides a big support for those African nations to kind of really help their economies to grow. And in that sense, basically, the European countries actually support development and in particular renewable energy development. So today it is actually easier to raise money for renewable energy projects in Africa than it is, for example, in the United States.
It's a very interesting point. Guðni, is this a way that...
This is very much... If we look at the Icelandic foreign policy over many years, it has included strong support for renewable energy in developing countries. And as for instance, the United Nations Geothermal Training Program has been run in Iceland and financed by the Icelandic government for more than 35 years. And we have educated somewhat 600 experts from the developing countries, which have returned home to exploit this. We see now things happening in Kenya that where we have from the school educated more than 100 experts and they are still sending more. We have only a limited number in the United Nations University, which is financed by the government. But now, when the need is accelerating, because in the African Rift Valley we are seeing a lot of viable projects being built and planned.
Now,
and
for our
geothermal.
listeners, the African Rift Valley is then Ethiopia.
Yes, it's Kenya, Ethiopia,
All right,
from Djibouti down to Zambia, really.
Okay.
And there we have about 15,000 megawatts of electricity from geothermal that can be built. And now the Kenyans are well on the way. The Ethiopians have big plans, and other countries are coming in as well. So this is a big adventure, really, that is based on this capacity building that has been going on for many years, and we see a lot of enthusiasm both from the African states, but also from as Alexander said, from the financing institute, because good projects in renewable are not very easy to find and define, and geothermal is very competitive when you have such good sources as we have in the African Rift Valley.
Dieter, you were referring to the cable now that has been constructed between mainland Europe and Germany. You were referring to that being a project of did I understand that right, 1 billion euros?
Well, that is a cable, an undersea cable, which went from the northern part, North Sea, from Germany to Norway, actually. So we get to the storage, hydro storage to Norway. So that's just one cable and one project. It's very expensive. And the other big project, which actually failed now, is the Janecek project. So there was a plan to have the production of solar capacities in the northern part of Africa. So, but actually there is still a lot of challenges and maybe chances in Africa. I would agree on that. I have also been to Nairobi last year and had some talks there. The only thing that's maybe a problem is that the whole policy and corruption thing in Africa still is not very attracting for people to invest. And so you have to find ways, especially maybe with European banks, to make it safe for investors to go there, because to realize a renewable project is much more complicated than to say, hey, let's get another coal plant there. So because the reliance on corruption is still very heavy in some parts, and that's the problem.
Now, to supply a market with a plug-and-play version of a technology is maybe a different issue than what Guðni was referring to as being slowly educating people for the different markets. Now, Guðni, regarding your return of investment, can you actually quantify how relevant the investment in the university, in the UN University of Geothermal Energy has been?
Yeah, what we see is that, of course, this is something that is paid and financed by the Icelandic government. But with all such operations, we do not sense the economic value. But until recently, when the need for increased capacity has been rising in both Kenya and in other countries, and the Philippines, for instance, we see that the companies there, they are sending students to these programs and paying full cost, because they find this to be the most cost-effective way to build up capacity, even if it's very expensive, with very much hands-on and experimental parts which are expensive, but it seems to be well worth the money, or the business sees it like that.
Alexander, you are running an organization called Think Geothermal, and that sounds like that you are addressing the public to encourage them to think geothermally. Is that a different way of thinking? Are you doing a lot of work in convincing people of taking your ideas?
Well, Think Geoenergy is a news platform for the global geothermal energy industry, being a voice for the industry, but also as a tool to educate the general public about geothermal, and showing that this is a lively industry with a lot of potential, and also a form of energy that has great potential in addressing some of the energy needs. So we're working both as a news platform. We also help promote geothermal in different capacities, and also act as a marketplace for the industry. So, yeah, we're basically acting as a platform for the industry. What is interesting though to see is that naturally, kind of with being such a focused platform, you're always biased towards that energy, and that we admit. But for other topics, there are different websites. So we're a bit of a niche media kind of outlet in that regard. But I wanted to briefly touch upon the discussion regarding the different countries' support for renewable energy, and particularly in the developing world. I think what is very interesting, and was raised partly by Dieter and by Guðni, is that naturally different countries have different sizes and different capabilities to provide support for development. And Germany does this in a bigger scale through the development banks. Iceland on a smaller scale naturally cannot do as much. And Iceland has chosen a very unique way of transferring some of that knowledge as part of this United Nations University Geothermal Training Program. There's a similar program that Iceland hosts on the fishery sector. Both two sectors that are very much inclined in the Icelandic economy, and thereby playing a big role, not only helping countries to achieve their potential, but also at the same time kind of supporting a little bit also their own industry. So Icelandic companies have been very active internationally, partly with the support from the Icelandic government. And thereby working in countries and then doing also a lot of capacity transfer on site, for example, in Africa, helping those countries to develop an industry. And I think that is very, very interesting. The other thing I wanted to kind of raise was what was Dieter mentioning, was the Janecek project, which is for people that don't know the project. The idea was to utilize the sun available in Northern Africa for big solar power installation, and then connecting with a cable into Europe to supply Europe with African solar power. And I think a similar concept is done in Norway by utilizing hydro dams that you can use as a pumped storage. Basically, you pump up water and then utilize power when it's needed, and then put it through a cable into market that needs it. And that shows that the energy market is completely changing. You have, at the one hand, kind of developing these longer cable infrastructures that help overcome certain energy needs at certain times of the day, while at the same time there's a move towards more, instead of centralized energy, is more distributed electricity.
This is an interesting point, Guðni. Do you see the possibility of giving development aid to a state in Europe and then having them coming as a competitor in the next few years?
Yeah, we would welcome that, because this business is, if we look at the geothermal, just the electrical part, we have about investment of about $600 billion that have to be made before 2050 to utilize the whole potential. And then we have the direct use of geothermal for heating and cooling, which is probably just as big. So these economical potentials, the potential for industry, economical development, are much greater than Iceland ever could dream of handling. So it's what we need is a stronger industry, and some kind of maybe a stronger backup in the political discussion. Because we had a very good example here that somehow geothermal energy is not considered as viable in Germany as we that look at it from the outside see it. And partly it's because of a lack of knowledge, but it's also because there's a competition between solar, geothermal, wind, and we are simply the least powerful in the lobby business in this area, so that we got somehow we are lost in the discussion and in the policy making, and that's not very good. That's very bad.
I think, just to add on this, that's both a blessing and a curse for Iceland, is that any picture that is being used about geothermal, you find mostly Icelandic pictures. Pictures from Icelandic geysers, power plants, the pools and so on, and thereby giving a picture of the great potential for geothermal. At the same time, it gives the impression that geothermal is only possible in areas with volcanic activities, like that little island in the North Atlantic, and that's not the case. So, while we by definition are a geothermal country and are perceived as an industry with lots of knowledge, we also have to kind of constantly stress out the possibilities for geothermal in countries that don't have volcanoes. But for example, in the south of Germany and in the Pannonian Basin in Eastern Europe and so on, showcasing the big opportunity. And I think in many cases, and that kind of makes a little bit of a historic kind of element, is that back in the Roman Empire, a lot of the geothermal baths today still exist and showcase that geothermal is in existence. You can take Budapest in Hungary, you can take geothermal spas in England, and so on. So there are kind of cases of geothermal being used so early all over Europe, and I think that is also part of the story we need to tell.
Yeah, I think actually that's a very strong point, if I can add to this, because I very much appreciate if we could learn in Germany from the Icelandic example, because as you mentioned, Alexander, we still have a lot of potential in Germany that is not evolved now. Especially, I'm from Bavaria, so I know there have been some things that try to explore some regions, but it's not really that gold rush we expected. And I think there's some challenges to be made. And if it's possible to get more of the Icelandic example to Germany, that would help us really much. But in the end, it's all having a good level playing field for renewable and for efficiency, and that's what we have to push for, especially for the climate summit now in 2015.
And maybe just kind of from the German experience, because you mentioned being from Bavaria, you have great examples in Bavaria of geothermal use, both for district heating and
could be much more.
And the recent greenhouse in Kirchweidach. These are fantastic examples that also kind of with your political background, you should be using a lot more in promoting the possibilities that particular energy type can provide for certain regions. And I think that's also the part in Germany, is that, yes, maybe for electricity production it's too expensive compared to other possibilities, but just for the heating perspective, the role geothermal could play in Germany, in the Upper Rhine Valley and in the Bavarian Molasse Basin, it's tremendous, and I think it should receive more support, both on the state level and on the federal level.
You're right. Yeah.
Guðni, I understand that both Alexander and Dieter are opening up a direct invitation to you. Are you going to take it from there?
Yes, as I said, that we have been working together with both Germany, France, and Italy and other countries in the geothermal area to build up some kind of a cooperation on research and on funding for research. And I think that we are also investigating what is happening and how this geothermal has come into the 2020 and 2050 targets. So this is all happening, and I think that it's of course very important that we learn from Iceland. But what is most important is that these nations now will put resources into investigating the potential and possibilities, because there is a lot to be found.
Thank you for that, Guðni. Just a quick reference then for our listeners that are either planning to come to Iceland or are already here. Is there a way to experience geothermal energy face-to-face for visitors in Iceland?
Oh yes, when you leave the airport, you will pass the Blue Lagoon, which is a wastewater pool from a power plant,
A wastewater pool from a power plant,
which is the most attractive tourist site in Iceland. But then we have all the fine swimming pools in Iceland, and of course enjoy heating and hot water in abundance in winter.
Alexander.
Maybe I think about that.
Well,
I'd like to come to Iceland, definitely.
Even the power plant is a great opportunity. There's some really nice power plants to visit.
Dieter, finally, I hope that you are already worked throughout now the Berlin afternoon traffic. When are you coming to Iceland?
Well, I hope soon. So I actually thought about coming to Iceland. Maybe I can make it happen this year, and I'd really like to have a trip. So we are able, as members of the German Bundestag, to have our own trips to other countries to get to know technologies and have good contacts. So maybe we have, as a result of this debate, I'm coming to you, and then let's see what we can do about that then.
Well, then would I kind of extend the invitation to, there's an Icelandic Geothermal conference in April 2016 that might be a great opportunity for you to experience geothermal.
Great. I think about that, definitely.
Thank you guys for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and your time. Vielen Dank nach Berlin. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Guðni, for joining us today. For all our listeners around the world, and I hope that we have a satisfactory listener group now in Northern Africa that was contacting us last time, because we did take on the solar project there. But for everybody on the road and at home, have a nice day and join us next time on the Icelandic Times radio show. Thank you.